Okay. Colleagues, we're going live. I'd like to welcome everyone to our electronic regional council meeting on January the 26th, 2022. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Council is practicing physical distancing. I'm present in the council chambers and other members are participating electronically. They're practicing too. I would like to acknowledge the land on which we gather virtually today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. I would now ask Will Short, our clerk, to do roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Redmond?
Present.
Councillor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Clarke?
Present.
Councillor Erb?
Present.
Councillor Foxton?
Present.
Councillor Galloway?
Present.
Councillor Harris?
Present.
Councillor Jaworski? Councillor Jowett?
Present.
Councillor Kiefer?
Present.
Councillor McGarry? Councillor Nowak? Councillor Shantz? Councillor Strickland?
Here.
Councillor Verbanovic?
Present.
We have regrets from Councillor Rents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. I would now entertain a motion to reconvene an open session. If I could have a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Please use your voting icons for yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we have some presentations today. Tracy, Elop, CEO, Carizon Family and Counselling Services. Alison Demuy, Director of Strategy and Community Engagement, CMHA, Waterloo, Wellington, and Rebecca Webb, Executive Director, KW Counselling Services. And they are going to talk about mental health needs in our community. Today is Bell's Let's Talk Day, a day where Bell Canada and individuals across our community and across Canada donate to mental health initiatives. But it's also much more than that. Bell Let's Talk Day is a reminder that on all days we need to destigmatize mental health, reach out if we need support, and most importantly, listen and be kind to our family, neighbors, co-workers, frontline workers, and even strangers we interact with on our daily lives, including on social media. This has been a challenging few years and continues to be a challenging season for many. To shed some light on the experiences of our community, as well as the need for support and resources available, we're delighted to welcome again Tracy, Elop, Alison Demuy, and Rebecca Webb. So thank you, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm going to start us off, and I'm going to share my screen for a brief presentation here. Everybody see that? Oh, it doesn't look like it's, is it working? Yes, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, all right. Thanks. I'm really excited that we can be here and to join Tracy and Rebecca. Between the three of us, we represent the largest amount of mental health and addictions care provision in the Waterloo region. So, you know, I think we hope that we can speak today on a little bit about the state of mental health in Waterloo region on a very important day, Bell Let's Talk Day. We call this, or I call it at least, the Super Bowl for mental health, because it is an amazing day where the focus and the spotlight is on destigmatizing mental health, drawing attention to what is mental health, sharing a little bit about the conversation, asking people to reach out for help, and just generally bringing awareness to the topic. And that is, of course, more important today than it ever has been as we step into 22 months of a pandemic, where, you know, I think certainly this latest wave, we've seen a good percentage, unfortunately, of our residents deal with the Omicron wave physically. But I would wager that we've seen 100% of our residents deal with this latest wave mentally. So it's an opportunity for us to stop and reflect and understand what's going on with mental health in our region. Let's see. I hope this is going. This is what a little bit about what I didn't want to talk to you today. We didn't want to talk about. Is the slide moving there for you guys? Yes.
No, it isn't.
Oh, okay. No. There we go. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. We didn't want to talk to you a little bit about what is happening in what we're calling the echo pandemic. Because as you know, the mental health effects of COVID-19 are still being felt and will be felt for many years. I didn't want to talk to you today about the fact that our latest data polls show that about 2/3 of our population are certainly feeling the negative emotions, and almost half, 41%, are admitting that they're seeing a decline in their mental health. I don't want to tell you about the fact that between our counseling collaborative, they've seen 100% increase, so doubling of people seeking counseling and treatment in the Waterloo region. I really don't want to tell you about a couple of key areas where we're really seeing that need. Right now, as of today, we have 61 children and youth who are waiting almost 6 months for a community eating disorders program. And unfortunately, we have 274 people that are waiting over a year, 400 days for a program. It's a phenomenal program called Skills for Safety Living. It's a suicide prevention program for folks who have had an attempt of suicide or are presently in suicide ideation. I can tell you, though, that if anyone is in crisis today or any day, there is no wait. So our front doors are always open. It's the wait time for ongoing care that is, we're seeing extraordinary wait times. And that's, of course, because of an additional need that we're seeing in our community. I'm going to pass it over now to Rebecca Webb, who's going to give you a little bit of hope as well.
Thank you, Alison. So I don't think points are terribly surprising either, which is one of the reasons we didn't want to sort of use this time exclusively to focus on the problem that we're seeing because everyone in this meeting is going through the pandemic also. So I don't think it's surprising that the need is growing and that more people are coming to our doors. What you may not know as much about is that the response, and we know this isn't unique to mental health services, but I can speak to what's happening in response to that wave of need. The work that's happening on the front lines and in leadership conversations has been absolutely phenomenal. I have never seen anything like it. So the degree of collaboration that is happening between organizations is amazing. We are working together in ways that haven't always been sort of the histories we've inherited for a whole host of reasons. So the Counselling Collaborative of Waterloo Region, which is for counselling agencies and Centre for Family Medicine, has a proposal right now for structured psychotherapy, which is making its way through that process. And hopefully we're going to be moving forward to implementation on that. We're linking to primary care in new ways because we've had to. We're finding different ways to deliver services because we've had to. And we're putting an emphasis on our most vulnerable residents because we've had to. We have people reaching out for services who've never reached out before. A lot of our call volumes are people who are finding themselves in a very escalated state, but haven't accessed mental health services before. And that's become normalized in ways that I hope will continue. So the work that is happening, the response has been amazing. And we also want to take a moment to thank you for your part in that, because Waterloo Region supports mental health services through for clients who are on OW, ODSP, and it makes a difference. So we're very grateful here. We're going to buck a trend. We're not here asking for money. We just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing and for, as a region, understanding that this has to be a priority for our wellness as a community.
So now it's my turn. I'm Tracy Elop. And as Chair Redmond said when we began, it's Bell Let's Talk Day today. And it is the day that we come together and we try to break down the silence around mental illness. And I don't know if you realize each year Bell Let's Talk has a theme. And this year, the theme of the day is supporting ourselves and supporting each other. And there is no better theme as we make our way through the pandemic than I think this theme is. And probably no better theme than we could ask for you as leaders, because as leaders, it is important that you support yourself. And also it's important for you to have an eye on the community and understand what the community needs. So let's talk about Bell Let's Talk. And when we put the presentation together, we said, we wanted to actually leave you with some things that you could do that actually would be hopeful, because we all know the needs in the community, and wanted to leave you with a few messages. So the first is acknowledging and understanding that after the physical effects of COVID are over, the mental health impacts will continue. One day, when we are lucky enough to be done with all of this, we will still be struggling. Our community will still be struggling with the mental health implications of this. If we think about kids being out of school for so long and the developmental challenges that they will have been facing, we think about family mental health and the stress that's been on parents and caregivers as they've struggled to parent and work at the same time. And we think about our frontline community mental health workers. And, we have been there for 2 years offering in-person service, and our people have been hearing story after story of trauma and escalated need. And while we know that there has been a lot of pressure on our hospital care system and our healthcare workers, there has also been pressure on the community mental health workers. And, I think what we all want you to leave today with on this point is, when this is all over, it's going to be easy to forget. We're going to want to forget, but we can't forget the long-term mental health implications. So if you could try and remember that 2 years from now, I think that would be good. So number two, you know what? There has always been equity in our system. We have known that for a long time, but the pandemic has shone a light on how important that is. And, we've seen the impact of lack of access to internet, for example, of housing insecurity, food insecurity. And so what we want you to think about as you go through the next few years, the next few weeks, we want you to remember and remind other people that when people are struggling in our community, it really is not about what's wrong with them. It's about what's happened to them, and encourage others that you come across to be kind and understanding of that. And then the last point that we have is really related back to Bell Let's Talk Day. We need conversation about mental health, and we've always needed that conversation, but we need it now more than ever. So we would encourage you to share your story if you have one. Make it okay to admit that you're not okay. And those can be small challenges where you recognize, I'm not feeling my best today. And when you share that, what it does is it opens up the door to others to have that open sharing. And we believe that if people share smaller challenges now and we can deal with them, then that's going to save us some of the bigger challenges in the future. So text, tweet, talk about it, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And don't be afraid to ask someone how they're doing, and listen and really listen to what their response is, and encourage people to get help when they need it through Here 24/7 or through calling the Counselling Collaborative. And then I think if you come right back to the theme of this and what Bell Let's Talk is all about, and this year's theme of supporting ourselves and supporting each other, if we do that, And if we talk about mental health, we can break the silence about mental illness. And we have to do that not just today, but we have to do it tomorrow, and we have to do it the next day, and we have to do it every day. So I think that's all we have formally presented. I really want to thank you again for having us today, for letting us share that message. So happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, and if you have time.
So just before I take questions, just on behalf of council, I really want to say to Alison, Rebecca, and Tracy, I can't think of a more impactful presentation on Today of All Days. So thank you very much for making this very meaningful presentation, but also for what you and your teams do all day, every day. You really are such a stable influence in helping people navigate these very troubling waters. Councillor Bravanovich.
Thanks, Chair Redmond, and let me begin by echoing your comments and saying a heartfelt thank you for the three of you for taking the time to come in this evening on what I know I'm sure was as busy, if not busier, day than normal, but a really important one for you to deliver the collective messages that you've delivered today. And more importantly, to not only deliver those messages, but also leave us with a few suggestions around the kinds of things that us as community leaders or those who are watching this council meeting can do as we continue to work through this collective shared experience that we've lived through. I guess for me, one of the things that has been the biggest concern throughout the pandemic, and some of my colleagues will know, will recall that I've raised this a number of times, but it's particularly concerned around young people and the impact that it's had on them. You know, it was this current set of lockdown that really made me reflect on, for example, our kids in high school and those in university. And each of those are 4-year chunks of life, and pretty formative chunks in terms of, not only your education, but your social networks, your experience through sport and intramurals and so on. And half of that time has been spent on the screen and not connecting with people in a meaningful way. And so I'm really worried about what the longer term implications of that. And just a conversation I had yesterday also made me reflect on the Mustard report and the early years and those kids and the fact that they haven't had the connections that are so important, and what are the longer term implications of that. Has there been any work that's started or any dialogue that's going on around how we should prepare as a community to really start dealing with this as over the coming years? Because I think it is something, as has been pointed out, it's not going to miraculously go away whenever this pandemic is over.
Who would like to start?
You want me to take a first go at that, ladies, and then certainly jump in? You're absolutely right, Councillor Bravanovich, that the effects of this are going to be seen, and we're seeing it largely with the children and youth population. Research, in particular, the Sick Kids research, has really demonstrated the effects of lockdown, being homeschooled, online schooled, is having and will have. So we know the data on this, and we know that is going to be an effect for quite some time. And I think you've already indicated what part of the solution is going to be. There's formalized mental health systems like ours that can certainly help folks when they've reached a point where they need care. But it really is going to be a whole of community approach that's going to be needed to this, from the school systems through to the formalized healthcare system, through to parents and support groups and everybody. And interestingly, days like today, Bell Let's Talk, go a long way to that, right? First, it's awareness and acknowledgement, understanding what some of the signs and symptoms are, what some of the tools and techniques are, and getting everybody to acknowledge that feeling mentally unwell is not a weakness. Feeling mentally unwell is a normalized state, especially for children and youth, and then working through the tools and techniques to get there. So it's not an easy answer for you about how we do it, but I do know that who does this, who is going to fix this problem is going to have to be a whole of community approach on that.
Rebecca or Tracy, do either of you want to weigh in? I see you both nodding your heads that Alison is covering the waterfront. Do you want to add anything, Rebecca?
I think Alison covered it, and you hit on family. So yes, the formal supports for sure, because the effects will be, and just the developmental effects, right? Like, so there are critical developmental milestones that our kids are running into age-wise that are not playing out. We don't have the tools for that, and the parents are struggling also. So I think that that family support unit and how we support families in this, because the parents aren't always doing great and the families aren't. So how do we create programming and create supports, formal and informal, that look at the found family, chosen family, the family unit, whatever that might look like, that get our kids through where they are now, and also transition them to what next year is going to be and the year after that.
Tracy, did they leave anything for you to say?
I think I could not add even one word.
Okay.
So Chair Redmond, I just really want to just say thank you again. I know for the three of you and your teams, the work that your teams are doing, particularly for individuals that are struggling. When they reach out to those team members, I'm sure for some people would feel like angels on earth in terms of the support that they give. And I know it's been a long, tiring 23 months, and please pass on our thanks to all of them.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jowett, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, you spoke to inequity, and I'm just wondering, to me, especially when you speak to youth and children in access, and I know that we can't always select where our offices are per se, but I'm just wondering, I'd heard something in the through the grapevine that we had wait lists and that we had a lot of folks from Cambridge going into Kitchener for mental health supports. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that and help me understand, because I'm really concerned about access, and so are the folks that have been writing to me. So can you help me with some of that, please?
Mm-hmm.
Tracy,
yeah,
do you want to start off?
To go forward? So one of the good things that we've done over the last number of years as a group of counseling agencies, we're unique in the region because we have 6 counseling agencies. They're all connected. And so one of the ways we've tried to manage the challenges is ensuring that you can make one call to the counseling collaborative, and that call can then be triaged. And one of the great things is with virtual service, it doesn't actually matter where you live. And so we've been really working through that system of allowing people to call in, have one call, and get the support that they need. There definitely is a need for in-person services, and not all of the organizations are doing in-person services to the extent of others. And so I think we need to just continue to open things up. But I think, to your point, Councillor Jowett, there is definitely, and we're not asking for funding, but there is definitely a shortage of funding for counseling services. And we're hopeful that with the Ontario Structured Psychotherapy, some of that will open up in our region. As Rebecca said, we have a strong application. We have a collaborative application. We believe we have a good network. We're connected through a common database. We've done a lot of things really well to make sure that we can get as many counseling services and supports to the community residents as we can.
Councillor Jowett? Or Rebecca, did you want to add something? Okay. Councillor Jowett, any further, or do you have another question?
Just quickly, so do you feel that there's a fairly, like, I just don't know how big this accessibility issue is. Like, is it fairly significant? Do we have a lot of it? And I understand the difference between, surely virtual is helping in some instances. I'm speaking more to, we have some supports in some beds in Cambridge that seem to be in question, and face-to-face supports in an urgent way are seeming to be some of the challenge, because, you know, when you're in crisis, getting on a bus for an hour is not exactly, feasible. So, and again, I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just trying to understand how can we mitigate that. The virtual online certainly, I think, is going to assist in a lot of ways to take some of the backlog away, because of course, you can look to help more people in a virtual world. But are there any insights you can give me so that I have a more truer understanding of how big the challenge is?
I saw 3 nodding heads. Tracy, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I think there's definitely a challenge, and I think there's definitely more need in Cambridge than what we're currently able to service in person. And I think in-person services in Cambridge has lagged a little bit. So, I don't know what else to say other than, we're working on it. One of the other pressures that we have, similar to other organizations, is the health human resource pressure. And it is very difficult to get MSWs right now, and particularly in organizations like ours. People have now identified that virtual counseling is a thing. They can do that privately and earn more money. And so I think as people have moved through the pandemic, there are so many layers of challenges that we're coming up against. And so, yes, there's a need in Cambridge, there's no doubt. And we're trying our best to collectively manage that need.
I might just add one point of data that might be of interest to you as well, and that is related to children and youth. The only inpatient beds that exist in our area, and that extends out to Guelph and Wellington, is at Grand River Hospital. So they're the only provider of children and youth inpatient mental health beds. So there's a need to see where we can expand those services, certainly, because unfortunately, children and youth who are sitting in Cambridge Memorial Hospital for a bed could be waiting several days to be transferred to the inpatient unit there. So that's a bit of a data point that might be of interest to you as well.
Thanks to each one of you. I appreciate everything you do. I hope that those comments didn't give any reflection of the appreciation we have for your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor McGarry, please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I also wanted to pass on my thanks to you and your teams for doing such incredible work with very limited resources over an incredibly challenging time. I just wanted to say that this morning there was a pre-budget consultation with the Ministry of Finance for the Ontario budget, and you can bet that mental health, and in particular those targeting children, was a hot topic. And we do know that agencies such as the Family Counselling Centre of Cambridge and North Dumfries is behind in funding and aren't able to keep up. There's a 6-month waiting list, and we were able to advocate for that organization and for mental health for everyone, but in particular children in our region. So just know that that is going up to the people that need to make those decisions to properly resource our mental health services. I wanted to say that it is very helpful to see positive social media on Bell Let's Talk Day and to really address how all of us are feeling. There's a crisis in mental health really across every sector. That's leaders, it's everyday folks that are going about their business, it's our children, and no one's left untouched. I think that what I'm going to question you on was the social media aspect. There's so much viciousness, so much negative issues ongoing that every single person's affected by it. You can see that in politicians' posts and discussion with each other. You can see it with sector leaders across the board. Everyone's looking to blame someone. And I'm just wondering if you can make some comments about how all of us collectively need to change that negativity and to actually support each other.
That's a tall order. Who wants to take that on? Alison? Rebecca?
I just put myself off mute first, but I don't have to go first. But I will just say that's an excellent point. And it's interesting that you should say that, because waking up this morning and looking at social media, I actually felt a sense of hope and a sense of a collective kindness and I was thinking about those that might be struggling with mental health or know somebody who's struggling with mental health. Today is a great day to get on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those things, because you'll see the passion that people have for mental health and the awareness and the hope that's happening. Unfortunately, it's only one day. Wouldn't that be nice if we could extend it into every day and have the same sentiment go? But maybe just for one day we get a bit of a reprieve from the hate and the cynicism, and actually see a little glimmer of hope.
Rebecca, did you want to respond? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Galloway.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Alison, Tracy, Rebecca, for the presentation, and particularly, of course, as others have said, it's the mental health caregivers, the counselors, of course, are probably largely forgotten in this pandemic. We think of our first responders and doctors and nurses and hospital workers, but certainly the work that is done in the various agencies is equally important. And it's in that regard I wanted to ask the question. So the province, of course, is generally responsible for health. The region, of course, has a role to play in the public health. And we did actually, as I recall, put some money aside for a mental health program associated with hospitality workers, I believe. And but the province, of course, has invested a lot of money in vaccines, in clinics, in testing, in ramping up hospital beds and infrastructure to deal with the pandemic. Has there been any similar investment on the counseling side, on the mental health side, or is that lagging? Because we talk about the long haul effects of COVID. Well, there's this unseen long haul effect on COVID that you're talking about, and it's certainly coming out pretty clearly in the data points that you talk about. So is the province on board? Are they making those investments? Do we have to advocate? How can we help in that regard?
Rebecca, do you want to start?
I can start with that one. So Councillor McGarry spoke to the budget submission and some of the work happening there, and very happy to hear that is coming forward. And I expect it's coming forward all over the province and the country and the planet, because that need is there. I will say, because I am really working to stay anchored in gratitude today, I will say that the response from the community and from various foundations and donors has been, and some of the flexibility from the ministry has been fantastic during the pandemic. The challenge we're facing, and I won't speak for Tracy and Alison, but I would say the challenge the sector is facing is it's not necessarily ongoing sustained supports at this point. And that is always the challenge. So it's extremely difficult to be able to staff up to meet the need where you don't know where the dollars are going to come from literally 3 months from now in order to support some of those roles. So it is understood that the need is there. I don't think anyone is shying away from that. We're just trying to figure out collectively how we're going to make that happen. And we also brought up the psychotherapy strategy. So the province is starting to move down. How do we have accessible access to counseling? Like what does psychotherapy look like if you could access it as though you were accessing their health service? So that work is starting to unroll. And our proposal for that, just to pick up on, also includes Cambridge, right? So that is a proposal put together by a collaborative of all of Waterloo regions. So we're hopeful that it will start to happen. We're also not the only need that's being juggled there. So I understand, but it's not going anywhere. It's going to be a while before we're out of this from a mental health perspective.
Alison or Tracy, do you want to weigh in?
Well, I'll weigh in quickly. I would say yes. Why not advocate for mental health services? We can still be grounded in gratitude and advocate for more mental health services because it's really necessary. And Alison maybe can speak to this a little bit more, but Helen Fishburne at CMHA and the community put together a broad proposal that got presented to Minister Tobolo maybe a month ago. And it was one of the first cohesive, full Waterloo Wellington proposals. It was all of the different organizations that are involved with the Ontario Health Team, with the mental health and addictions groups, and all coming together to say, this is what our community needs. And so I think to the extent that we could make that available to you so that at least you're aware of it, I think that might be helpful as your speaking points.
Alison, last word?
Yeah, last word, and you may not like it, but I think the reality is, COVID taught us that the solution to the pandemic was not the province's problem. It wasn't the federal government problem. It wasn't a municipal problem. It was all levels of government had to come together and find their space and work collectively on this. And frankly, I think we've done a very good job of that in all sectors of government and all of the parts of the region coming together. The same thing is necessary for mental health. So it's not just a provincial issue. It's not just a federal issue. It's not just a municipal issue, but it certainly would require all levels of government to think about the role that they can play. Public health plays a very key role in awareness and promotion and education around mental health. So that folks don't need to come and access the kinds of services that we have. So, I think it requires a whole community approach to what we're going to see is going to be really an echo pandemic for years to come. Councillor, I don't want to leave it on that low note, though.
No, that's okay, because Councillor Erb put his hand up. Councillor Erb, do you want to have a question or a comment?
It is a question. I wasn't sure if I took it down. Sure if you were trying to end this conversation or not. But my question is, how is the collaborative working through all of this? It seems to me that that's probably a really important tool that you have now with the wait lists and working between the agencies. Can you just take a minute to elaborate on that?
Can I take that just as a super quick example, because it is concrete and it's beautiful and I may or may not cry, but that's neither here nor there. So we're not a huge agency. Our total funding, it comes in at just under $3 million. In the month of November, KW Counselling Services, the intake department for counseling had 716 calls. So new calls for people looking for service, for therapists that already were carrying full caseloads. So we had, at that point, we usually have, I think, 2.6 FTEs working intake. We had one body. We had one body sitting in that chair and 716 calls. The intake department from Carizon said, hey, can we help? And we said, oh, yes, please. Please, if you could help us, we have 716 calls and we need to get back to these people because they need to know. And they need to know sooner rather than later when they have an appointment, who they're going to see, are they going to be able to help? What does that going to look like? That came from the front line, and they did that knowing that they would be supported all the way up the management tree, and they were. So that leadership has been demonstrated from the top throughout to say, figure out what the problem is, ask how we can help. Yes, we're all swamped. Yes, all the boats are flooded. And we're going to figure it out, because if one of us is not okay, none of us are okay. And so we're going to make that work. So I hope that is one example, and that keeps playing out.
Great. That's great to hear, and how that cooperation is working. Thank you.
So I almost hate to spoil that lovely note, but I'm going to acknowledge Councillor Foxton and then Councillor Verbanovich, and then we will say thank you to you, lovely ladies, and thank you so much for bringing this important issue to the surface today of all days. Councillor Foxton and then Councillor Verbanovich.
Thank you, and through your chair. I love your heart. I love your heart, ladies. And you know what? I believe in the heart of our society and our people. And I believe a lot of people want to do more good if they have an opportunity. What we have to do is be the guiding point and show them where the need is and show them how to meet the need. And so Let's Talk isn't just today. It's every day and every moment. And I believe Council has that heart And I believe your heart shines and you spread that heart. So thank you so much. And I believe in us and I believe in our world.
Councillor Bravanovich.
Good comments, Councillor Foxton. One of you earlier mentioned the number for folks to turn to if they are in need of support. And I'm wondering if we can just end with reiterating that for anyone who's listening and maybe is at that point today or any day in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll start with the Here 24/7 number, and then the Counselling Collaborative can give the other option there. In any point in crisis, anybody can call 1-844-HERE-247 any time of the day. A qualified intake, referral, and crisis counselor is always there.
Tracy or Rebecca, do you want to add any other websites or contacts?
The Counselling Collaborative can be reached through Carizon. So that number is 519-743-6333.
Rebecca?
That number will get through to any of us. So if you have Here 24/7, which is more if you're in crisis, if you know the level of support you need is looking for counseling, go through the Counselling Collaborative. We will figure it out in the kitchen and get you where you need to be.
So again, our heartfelt thanks for coming and highlighting this important topic, and thank each of you for your strong leadership. These kind of collaboratives, I think, only work when we're all rowing in the same direction, and clearly you have figured out that sweet spot to support each other and our communities. So on behalf of the 630,000 people in Waterloo region and however many are in Wellington, thank you very much for making sure that this meeting these needs is as seamless as possible for those who need it. So thank you again for your leadership and for coming to highlight this today.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. We understand if you don't. I have no petitions. I have some delegations. We have 3 for tonight. They each have 5 minutes to speak, and I would like to remind all delegations some guidelines to participate in tonight's meeting. Please leave your video and camera off and your microphone and audio muted until you're called upon to speak. And I know this isn't necessary to warn any of the delegations tonight, but you will result in immediate removal if you interrupt councillor, staff, or other delegations, any derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. So our first delegation is Wendi Campbell, CEO, FoodBank of Waterloo Region, an annual update. Wendi, it's always great to see you, and I thank you for coming back, because I think we ran so long at a previous meeting that you opted to come back. So thank you for being here again, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me back. Somebody told me 10 minutes, so I hope I don't go over, but thank you so much for having me. Good evening, members of council and viewers this evening. I'm Wendi Campbell. For those who we haven't met, I'm the CEO at the FoodBank of Waterloo Region. And as we head into a new year, there's lots of conversations in our community, in our province, in our country about food insecurity and rising food prices and mental health. I'm so thrilled to follow my friends from CMHA and Carizon and KW Counselling today. We actually shared a blog post today in honor of Bell Let's Talk Day. So there's connections everywhere in this network. I thought it would be a good opportunity to provide you with a bit of a year in review of what's been going on at our organization, the FoodBank of Waterloo Region, but also the Community Food Assistance Network in Waterloo Region, and address some of the opportunities and the challenges that are ahead of us in the coming year. I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me for a minute. There we go. Oops. For those of you who may not know, the Community Food Assistance Network in Waterloo Region is the most innovative in the country. Our network is a collaboration of over 100 local community organizations that provide food and support to those in need. The Food Bank of Waterloo Region and the Cambridge Food Bank are at the center of this network. And our job as food banks is to acquire, coordinate, and distribute food to organizations who are providing essential food services to ensure no one in our region goes hungry. The pandemic certainly presented some logistical challenges for the food bank and the network. We lost about 85% of our volunteers when we had to limit access to our facilities to only essential workers. Our transportation needs increased significantly, 140% increase at its peak as we began new delivery programs. The need for food banks also intensified as a result of job losses. We saw a 26% increase in food bank users. And despite these challenges, I'm so proud to say that our organization found creative ways to pivot and to adapt in our effort to provide emergency food assistance across the region. We also supported the Region of Waterloo's emergency response plan, leading the food support control group to ensure that everyone was working collectively together to address food insecurity throughout the region. And this work led to the creation of a food assistance referral line, a food hamper delivery program for residents who didn't have the means to access programs due to mobility, illness, or isolation. And one thing I do want to emphasize is our commitment to learning during this pandemic. While the challenges we faced were unique and unprecedented, it also allowed us to explore opportunities to extend our reach across the community. With limited access to community facilities that supported food distribution programs, we made a shift to provide refrigerated vehicles on sites. We also launched the Mobile Pantry Program, a vehicle that delivers a variety of fresh food to vulnerable neighborhoods. And with the support of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, the program has helped households across the region access food assistance during these challenging times. While it's certainly been a difficult year, we are so proud of the work we have accomplished. 6.8 million pounds of food was distributed to our partners. 91,660 food hampers were distributed by our partners in the Community Food Assistance Network. 666,950 community meals were served. 34,620 participants were served. 13,957 households received food assistance. 1.4 million pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables were distributed, and 89,247 pounds of fresh, frozen, and dry food was repackaged in our innovative Fresh Approaches Food Center. And let me just say, on behalf of the Community Food Assistance Network, we could not have done this without the support of you, of Regional Council, our community partners, and the citizens of Waterloo Region. Thank you so much. I do want to take a moment for those who are new at the table to provide a little more detail about how our network functions. The Food Bank acquires, coordinates, and distributes food to the Community Food Assistance Network. The amount of vital services that are included within that network is quite substantial. They include soup kitchens, community and outreach centers, shelter, residential service providers, food hamper programs, and family resource centers. We each have our own roles and responsibilities within the network, and our programming ensures that every municipality, every community is covered, and no one in our region is left behind. And this is what makes our relationship between the food bank and our partners so unique and so successful. We cover such a broad range of programs and services, and we strategize accordingly to maximize our efforts and avoid service duplication. We also know that food insecurity is not an isolated phenomenon. It is intrinsically linked to poverty and economic security. And working with our partners, we're able to combine our resources and collectively address these issues. The region plays a vital role in support of this network. The regional funding of food security programs amounts to $744,000, which supports programs in each city and township in Waterloo Region. This funding is essential and a consistent part of the annual budgets of these programs. Your continued support is so important and so appreciated. I would not be remiss if I didn't acknowledge some of the challenges we expect to face in 2022. I think there's a great deal of certainty about what's next, and it's going to be really difficult to determine the economic and social costs, whether it be more job losses, lockdown, or costs associated with self-isolation. We are dealing with interruptions in food supply chain. We're dealing with rising energy costs, labor shortages, transportation challenges, and the increase in food prices. Over the past year, this volatile combination of rising food prices, housing costs, unemployment, and low incomes, we've been calling it the perfect storm. It's not often that we see all of these factors significantly affecting Canadians all at once, but this is what's happening, and it's putting immense pressure on the ability of our residents to put food on their tables. We are working carefully with the structured relationship within our network to use our resources effectively and efficiently. We work hard to avoid service duplication. We follow the ethical food banking code, ensuring that services are delivered with dignity, respect, and confidentiality. And we also have the knowledge to connect our residents to amazing programs and services within our community that are delivering vital programs and services. Making connections upstream is vital to improving food security. And with the anticipated tidal wave of new clients accessing food banks this year, our network has been working tirelessly to make sure we're all positioned to weather the storm. We have engaged a broad and diverse mix of suppliers to avoid any supply chain disruptions. We've also pre-ordered an abundance of our most popular food items. And learning the valuable lessons from the economic shock of the pandemic, we have assessed our finances and have a solid plan in place as an organization, but also as a network to address any fluctuations in donations and market uncertainty. We are well prepared for the challenges that lie ahead. Food banks and other charitable organizations were not meant to be long-term solutions in addressing poverty and food insecurity. Our food bank was founded in 1984 during a recession to help the unemployed obtain food. And now nearly 40 years later, we're still here dealing with a rising number of program participants who rely on their network for assistance. In these times of economic uncertainty, our role is to ensure people have access to food and vital supports, and we're more than prepared to see that through. But we do need a more holistic approach to addressing the socioeconomic challenges that have been plaguing our community for years. We continue to work with our national and provincial partners in finding solutions to address food insecurity in hopes that we can lift people out of poverty and help them live with dignity. But right now, our focus is to make sure that people in our community are fed. In a world-class community with a world-class food assistance network, we will leave no one behind. Thank you so much for your time today and for your continued support of our network. I want to thank the citizens of Waterloo Region for their continued support of this important work. And I also want to thank the staff and the volunteers in our entire community food assistance network for their passion and continued commitment to this work during the most difficult times we've ever faced.
Thank you so much, Wendi. I have a couple of questions. Councillor Clarke, please go ahead.
Thanks, Wendi. Thanks for coming. Thanks to the food bank. I can attest to all of the wonderful work you do. You know it, but I'm not sure that my colleagues do, that the food bank provides food for our shelters as well as for our supportive housing programs. We wouldn't be able to offer the service that we do without them, and the people we serve would not be able to eat the way they do, because on the pennies a day of disposable income they have, they certainly wouldn't be able to keep their bellies full and the bellies of their children. And I do want to say the mobile pantry is amazing. It started recently at Lincoln Road. Lincoln Road is our supportive housing program for women and children. We have 70 women and children there. And we've always had the food hamper from the food bank there, but now we have fresh food and dairy and meat and things like that. And it's just the high point of people's week when it comes and they get to get some fresh stuff that is so rare for them. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Our volunteers are enjoying spending time with the residents there. They've been having some great conversations about new foods.
Thank you so much. Councillor Kiefer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And hi, Wendi. And I'm a big fan of you and your team and the work you do too. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit about the collaboration between the food bank regional food bank and the Cambridge North Dumfries food bank, which is so important to the people in North Dumfries and Cambridge. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on that and fill us in on how that works or is working. And when you take in funds and things like that and food, is there a percentage, or how do you work out what goes to Cambridge and North Dumfries? How does that work?
Yeah. So thanks for that. And we've had a couple of conversations about this over the last few years. So I'll share with everybody else that at the center of this network are our two food banks. And a lot of that partnership goes way back to 2007, 2008, when we did the Waterloo Region Shares Research Study, which talked about really solidifying our network as a network and building the momentum and building really deliberate partnerships within that network. And at that time, we identified very distinct roles and responsibilities. And what's unique about the Cambridge Food Bank is they wear multiple hats in our network. They play the role of a food bank, but they also play the role of a frontline service provider. So we actually meet monthly on a regional food acquisition and distribution plan to determine what food is coming in, what food has come in. We are in the process of embarking on joint inventory management system. So within a year, we're actually going to have a set of eyes on both inventories in both facilities to be able to share a lot more effectively the food resources. Last year, we were able to transfer close to 400,000 pounds of food directly to Cambridge for use in programs in Cambridge. And we were also able to provide some pandemic supports to some of the larger organizations who had really diverse needs that couldn't be met by the Cambridge Food Bank. So we sort of sat down and had some great conversations about, it doesn't matter who's providing the service, we just need to make sure that the programs are getting what they need when they need it, and who is the best organization to take the lead on distributing that service. So that was a game changer for a lot of those programs. In terms of the fundraising pieces, we both benefit from relationships that we have with Food Banks Canada and Feed Ontario, our provincial and national food bank associations. So both equally benefited from a number of funding opportunities through the federal and provincial governments. But we also have done some joint fundraising initiatives with a share going to each food bank and other programs in our network, including Wilmot and Woolwich. And those programs, that cost sharing is connected to the number of individuals served in those communities. I think on one of my slides, there was a bit of a pie chart of sort of what those percentages are. I believe Cambridge is about 26% of the service. So they receive 26% of some of those funding campaigns. So we were able to distribute over $100,000 directly to the Cambridge Food Bank last year, in addition to the flow-through funding that came from the region. So it's working really well in crazy times, but we have each other on speed dial right now, which is very helpful.
Wendi, thank you very much for that explanation. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I love the work that you and your team and of course the team in Cambridge does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Wendi. Welcome, and thanks for the report, and thanks for the great work that you're doing in the community. I have a question related to the breakfast programs and lunches that are distributed to the schools, and that's been off and on again because of COVID. And how, my assumption is that the food bank supplies the food to the volunteers that prepare the breakfast and the lunches, or how does that work within your volunteer system and the food bank?
So it depends on the program. We have a number of direct programs that operate out of schools that exactly what you said, we provide the food directly to the school, to the volunteers, to the teachers. We also partner from time to time with Nutrition for Learning. And both of the school nutrition programs, Nutrition for Learning and Food for Kids, have actually gone through some pretty significant leadership changes this year. So things are a little dicey on sort of consistency of flow of that distribution as those two new leaders are learning how their organizations operate and what they need. But we do target, and part of our acquisition strategy is to look for food products that are specifically helpful to those school-based programs because they have very different needs. So school boards have very specific requirements for the food that can be distributed in the school programs. And so we look for some of those things. So really healthy items, low in salt, low in sugar. And as we're able to access those those supplies, we can send them out to those school programs. And then we did have some really interesting partnerships directly with Nutrition for Learning, especially at the beginning of COVID, making sure that they had the right supplies at the right time for their pop-up programs. And then they were actually able to share some food back with us, food that was not as appropriate for their pop-up programs, but was more useful in food hamper programs. So there was a lot of sharing and swapping going on. And I think once things get a little more stable in the school system and we get back to regular consistency of those school programs, there's going to be lots of opportunities for us to continue to work together.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you, Wendi, virtually, if not at the auditorium, maybe soon. But also, I want you to know that I use that pottery bowl every day. So, thanks very much. Now, I know the food bank doesn't, as you said, doesn't provide direct food hamper programs and such. But I'm curious, because I'm sure you would know, for instance, our church, and I did help out from time to time doing food hampers, suspended that program during this COVID period. But you got to know some of these people who were regularly receiving the food hampers from the St. Vincent de Paul Society. And I've wondered, like, how did they survive, or how did they access food during this period when food hampers like ours were suspended?
Yeah. And you know what? That's the one piece of data I don't have at my fingertips, but I have good data on that. We actually did a data assessment. I think it was 8 months in, to make sure that people were being connected to programs. So as a lot of people know, part of our piece of the pandemic plan was to actually shut down programs in the early days of 2020. And that was to, number one, keep volunteers safe, keep our elderly volunteers who were at greatest risk out of public settings. But it was also to build a bit of a backup plan for the entire network. We even sent half of our staff home at the beginning to ensure that if our frontline staff were to get sick, we had a backup plan. And so a lot of those agency partners were also part of that backup plan. But what we were able to do is we were able to redirect a lot of those families to the other programs. So what happened when we started to, and when programs like the church program started to close, we were able to redirect and build capacity of those larger food hamper programs to fill that gap. And we did some data analysis, and it was over 90% of those individuals and families, I believe, were able to access another program. And for those residents who had mobility issues and could not access a program, so if you think about it, I know your church had done a lot of deliveries to seniors, those were captured by our new delivery program. So a lot of our frontline programs didn't have the capacity to continue their delivery programs. So we actually partnered with the Salvation Army, and through our centralized call line and our volunteers that we had on site at the food bank, we actually did start packing food hampers, and the Salvation Army team and the transportation team at Family and Children's Services actually stepped in to help us with those deliveries. So anybody who was isolated still had access to receive a food hamper, and that program is still running right now.
Thanks, Benny.
So, Wendi, I want to thank you very much for the work you do all day, every day in your team. And I don't know if I've said this to council before. My recollection, it was March 17th, 2020, that the province declared a state of emergency. I believe that the 7 area municipalities in the region declared it, I think it was on March 26th. But I tell you, the ink wasn't even dry on that declaration of emergency when Wendi Campbell left a message on my phone saying, we've got our pandemic plan and we're implementing it. You were so fast off the mark, Wendi. You absolutely dazzled me. So you continue to do amazing things. So Wendi, thank you very much for coming and giving us this update.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Mifrah Abid, Program Coordinator, Coalition of Muslim Women in Kitchener-Waterloo, and she's speaking on the notice of motion from Councillor Clarke against Bill 21. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening, and so nice to see all you lovely councillors again. It's a tall order coming after Wendi and all the amazing work that the food bank does, and I'm so appreciative of having a resource like that in the community. I just wanted to start with acknowledging that. As mentioned, my name is Mifrah Abid, and I'm the coordinator of the Together Against Islamophobia program. with the Coalition of Muslim Women, or CMW for short. And I come here to make a special request to the council. In 2019, the Coalition of Muslim Women had asked this esteemed council to pass a motion to denounce the discriminatory law that is Bill 21, or the laicity law of Quebec. As we near the 5th anniversary of the Quebec massacre, we come with this request again. The rhetoric of excluding and punishing religious minorities must end. As you may be aware, January 29 is the National Day of Remembrance of the Quebec mosque attack and National Day of Action Against Islamophobia. Make no mistake, Bill 21 is state-sanctioned Islamophobia, and it curtails the human rights of Canadian citizens on the lines of religion and creed. It is a gross violation of the Charter of Rights, so much so that the Quebec government had to resort to the notwithstanding clause to force it into legislation. Bill 21 sets a very negative precedent to all the other provinces and regions in Canada. It tells religious minorities that they are just one election away from religious persecution. I'd like to also point out that Bill 21 does not impact Muslim women alone. Our brothers and sisters from the Sikh, Jewish, and Christian communities also bear the brunt of this unjust law. Waterloo Region's Muslim community stands in solidarity with all the other faith communities that this law targets. We are only safe as long as each one of us is safe. Bill 21 tramples not only religious freedoms, but also seeks to control women's bodies by legislating what they can or cannot wear. Just in December last year, just a month ago, a beloved teacher in Quebec was removed from her job, not because she was underqualified, not because she had done anything inappropriate, but she was removed because she chose to wear the hijab. What does this say about us as a nation? Negative narratives around religious minorities have deep and long-lasting impacts. On June 6 last year, a young man mowed down a Muslim family in broad daylight in London, Ontario. Much like the Quebec mosque shooter, he was consumed by an unspeakable amount of hate for Muslims. He did not know the murdered family. He was just on a hunt for anyone who looked Muslim. You see how the demonizing and punishing of a community's appearance can have disastrous consequences. We need to build a culture of equity and fairness. We need to counter hate actively, tangibly. The National Council of Canadian Muslims, the World Sikh Association of Canada, and the Canadian Civil Liberties Association are mounting legal challenges against Bill 21. We need to support this endeavor. We need to say loud and clear that hateful, discriminatory laws like this will not be tolerated. Therefore, I, on behalf of the CMW and the Muslim community of Waterloo Region, implore this council to pass a motion to not just denounce Bill 21, but to actively oppose it. I ask the Region of Waterloo Council to unanimously support Councillor Clarke's motion. I hope that this council will pass this motion and be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you so much for appearing as a delegation. I don't see any questions at this point in time. Oh, Councillor Foxton, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, this came to our council a few weeks ago and we passed it, denouncing Bill 21. And I'm fully agreeing with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we will be dealing with the notice of motion later in the meeting. Michael Clifton, Steering Committee Member, Interfaith Grand River, speaking to the motion as well. Michael, are you with? You are with us. Welcome, Michael. You have the floor.
I am. I've got you partly on my headset and partly on the mic, so I hope you can hear me. Am I coming through okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to follow Mifrah's lead a little bit and acknowledge not only the food bank. I mean, our church has also worked with Wendi and the food bank and has loved every minute of that and stand in awe of them continually, but also the Coalition of Muslim Women of KW. I think they're true leaders in our community, passionate outreach and building bridges between our various communities, and just very pleased to be able to stand with them today. So I think, there's a bunch of you here who know who I am, so I'm not going to waste time with a self-intro. I've used it sometimes in these kind of settings just to emphasize that I really care about our community, and I have my fingers in a few different pies because I love what this community is. We chose to move here from Toronto because of what Waterloo region is like, and its potential, and it's been a great place to live now for a couple of decades for us. So we're pleased, and I'm pleased to have the friendships and associations I see around this table. I'm especially here today representing Interfaith Grand River. As you know, we have some written submissions in your package. I think Interfaith Grand River also needs very little introduction. They've, as a group, we've provided more than 20 years of being in the forefront of trying to establish positive relationships interculturally and interfaith throughout the region. And as you know, many of our founding members have been doing that for decades more and will continue in that service. So these are things that matter to us passionately. So my purpose tonight is just to reinforce our desire that the region would set an example of commitment to the deepest values of Canada, the kind of values we try to represent to the world, through supporting the councillor's motion regarding Bill 21. I did want to add one additional comment, though. I think the majority of what I'd want to say is in our letter, and I hope you read that letter and statement. They're not terribly long. I also think a lot of this is, there's a Japanese word, atarimai, which is just, it's right on target, which really means it's the target that's right in front of you. And I think it's so obvious why we need to support this motion that it doesn't require a lot of explanation. So I wanted to add some comments that really came from the discussion amongst our steering committee and with a few other members of the community as we were considering doing this delegation. And that was a concern that a few of our members raised about giving consideration to Quebec and its sense of having a distinct national identity in Canada. So I want to more or less quote from the comments of one steering committee member who's originally from Quebec. And he said, "I think we're far more likely to be heard by the leadership in Quebec and by the Francophone majority who solidly support the secularism law if, while expressing appropriate concerns regarding Bill 21, we also express our concern for and commitment to the survival and flourishing of Francophone culture and language. Without taking this into account, we may help build the bridge between Canada's two solitudes, and without that effort of bridge building, we could be in the position of expressing an assumed Anglo-Canadian superiority, lecturing or attacking Quebec for not thinking or acting like of us. So while we take the position that Bill 21 needs to be opposed, we acknowledge that there could be a further mistake by not acknowledging the need for a nuanced approach." So I repeat those comments largely for the benefit of those who thought it important to raise the concerns. In our view, those thoughts don't in any way obviate the need for this motion to be passed. The same steering committee member that suggested all that said this is not a call for inertia. So we recognize, and I want to point out that tonight's motion doesn't set out a particular strategy for dealing with the province or Quebec, or a demand that the region enter into some dialogue with the province, which would be unusual on its face. And that's not the consideration at this time. In expressing support for those who challenge Quebec's secularism law, we think the region is expressing the will, interests, and concerns of at least the majority of citizens of this community who feel personal offense at the impacts and implications of the law. That a law like this would be established and then tolerated in Canada seems in itself intolerable. So regardless of sensitivity to Quebec's self-identification and its expression, there really is no place in Canada for continued tolerance of the kinds of bigotry and attitudes of superiority that underlie and inform Bill 21. And we hope you will decide tonight to align the region's public expression with what I expect are the expressions that most of you and most of your constituents share, your personal feelings, beliefs, and understanding of what's right and ethical for Canada. So that's all.
Thank you so much, Michael, for adding your voice and that of Interfaith Grand River to this discussion. It's very important. So thank you. It's always nice to see you. You are more than welcome to say as well if you like. Colleagues, that is the end of our delegations, and I'm going to ask for your indulgence, and we're going to go to the Chief Administrative Officer report. It's Community Safety and Wellbeing. It is found on page 27. And we have taken a little bit more time to get to this point in our agenda than we were originally called for, so I'm going to ask for your indulgence, and we're going to cover off this presentation right now. It's very important, and we have some presenters that are maybe we're going to lose because of the late hour. And Mr. Lochner, I'll turn it over to you. We're going to go right to Connie. Okay, Connie.
Thank you so much, and through you, Chair. I am absolutely thrilled to be co-presenting the Region of Waterloo's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan this evening. I'll be joined in presenting by Fauzia Beg, who I know we're all delighted has just yesterday accepted the role of Director of the Reconciliation and Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Office here at the Region. We'll be also later joined by community members who have been a part of the process, and I will introduce them as we go. Our presentation this evening has 6 parts, starting with where we started, the journey to a safe and well community, an overview of the community engagement, an overview of the framework, some comments around next steps, and then some time for questions. I will begin by saying that this work was meant to be different, and I can happily say that where it started is very different to where it is now. This was because we did not limit ourselves to legislative requirements. Instead, the community showed us a new way of working, and that guidance brought honesty, hope, and a focus on change. This was not a process to reinvent the wheel or to have the same conversations that we've had in the past. This was about a call to action, to start the process of building new relationships and shifting power. This work has been a journey and will continue to be a journey. In the spring, we brought together 3 committees to start guiding the process, and each committee brought something very unique to the table. I'd like to thank our steering committee, who brought incredible wisdom and pushed us to confront uncomfortable realities and challenged us to not focus on the what, but on the who, to ground the process entirely from the perspective of those facing the greatest barriers to safety and well-being in the community. I want to thank our advisory committee of system leaders, who brought insights and a commitment to elevate the voices of those they serve to drive real change in a system that sometimes feels unchangeable. And finally, I want to thank the youth committee. These youth have been nothing short of incredible, and I can't wait for them to present their recommendations and advice to you this evening. We've made it clear that the voices of these youth carry the same weight as all of us here tonight. These youth are our future, and I can tell you we're in very good hands. But in the spirit of honesty and change, I want to share that our committees were clear that they did not represent or speak on behalf of everyone. This is often a flaw of traditional government-led committee structures. With this in mind, they pushed the process to create space for new voices, a commitment that is now set in stone and will continue well into the future around this. What we are learning is that community engagement is not just a means to an end, it's an end in itself. It's about building relationships that develop over time and guide change. And over the course of these past several months, this has been the focus. I'll turn it over to Fauzia now to talk more about the engagement approach.
Thank you, Connie. I'd like to start by saying, if we had done this work outside of a pandemic, it would have looked very different. But we did what we could in the current circumstances. And I'll be honest, it was challenging to find meaningful ways to hold conversations in a world of virtual meetings. Nonetheless, because people cared, we were able to adapt and create meaningful spaces where people felt safe to share their stories and experiences. Nothing was off the table, and I shared many difficult moments with many leaders during these conversations when they shared with me the significant barriers communities continue to experience. Yet within each of those conversations, rays of hope always surfaced and shone through. Sometimes they were just faint glimmers, and other times shining bright as community leaders shared their resilience, strength, knowledge, and wisdom within their community and the will to continue on and work towards a better future for all of us. Using the steering committee's guidance, the engagement was designed to listen to and understand the needs and barriers to safety and well-being in Waterloo Region from those who are the ones who often experience them. We started with reaching out to community leaders and organizations. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again because it's so important. Community leaders have trusted relationships within these communities and understand the issues and barriers faced by the communities and the strengths they hold. Through this network of connections, many conversations were held. The value of always space at the table was used to ensure that those who were not part of these existing networks could be invited to join the conversation. As always, we asked leaders to suggest other leaders or organizations who should be invited and welcomed into this process. We tried to reduce barriers to engagement and remained open and flexible in our approach, tailoring and involving the engagement effort to respond to community needs. This work was intended for engagement, but went far beyond that. It was also about building relationships and trust. We always centered the voices of the people engaged and put much intention and focus on building those relationships by listening first. As part of these engagements, all efforts were made to build on past learnings and to respect and acknowledge the previous conversations undertaken in the community. Although we talked to many in these conversations, we recognize that many more individuals, organizations, and groups have perspectives to share on what makes a community safe and well. One voice does not speak for an entire community. Our plans moving forward include broader community engagement for this reason, so that we can continue to diversify and learn from many individuals that make up Waterloo Region. I would now like to invite the people who help guide this framework to reflect on what they felt for the future of our community as we were journeying along this process. The first speakers are part of our steering committee. Unfortunately, both Donna Dubé and Melissa Ireland were unable to join tonight, but I'm happy to say Fauzia Mazhar is here with us. So I'm going to turn it over to Fauzia Mazhar.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Is it okay, Fauzia, for you to take the presentation down? Sorry, I cannot see anyone. This is much better. Thank you. I did not know that I was the only one who was left here, but I'm happy that I didn't leave. I was about to leave as well. So thank you again. I'm happy to be here, and thank you, Connie and Fauzia, for presenting a little bit of the journey behind the document, the framework that I'm sure the councillors had an opportunity to see. I would say that I think most people over here know that I've been in this business, if you want to call it business, for a very long time, and reached to a point that it sometimes feels hard to believe that change can happen. The process as it started definitely wasn't easy, but the respect that the steering committee members, at least I can talk myself, I felt that, okay, my voice was important and what I was saying was important, and my voice and others' voice in the room could change basically the very primary direction for this framework was very important. So instead of focusing on something more general in nature in terms of community safety for all, if we can shift the focus, definitely we want community safety for all. But if we can focus more, if we can narrow our focus or zoom in to those who are most vulnerable, who are most sort of at risk of threatened safety and well-being in our community, if we can focus on them, we might be able to do better. And that big shift in the primary direction of this work was, I think, first glimmer of hope, if I can say that. And now, and I will say this also again, that at one point, it looked like we don't know how this work is going to be completed. It looked like we're running against the time. It's really like, you know, it seemed very difficult, but I don't know how people who were involved in the background work were able to do it and finish the work and finish it actually very elegantly. Very happy with the final results. I'm very happy that this framework or this whole plan didn't really try to invent the wheel and really consulted, or as the language used in the actual final document is actually not final, but the document is scanned,
more than 200 resources that were generated, produced in this community, probably like other places too. I have seen a lot of resources there that were produced in this community. That says a lot. It's not that we're starting from scratch. We are acknowledging that the work has been ongoing in this community. We're going to build on this work. So that is really wonderful. And the other piece that gives me hope that this time things will look differently is that we're naming hate, oppression, racism, discrimination. And again, just because I've been in this business for a very long time, I remember occasions when I uttered the word racism and the whole room would just shut down. Nobody would say a single word response. And you just have to move on to other sort of business on table because nobody is taking any interest in this conversation. So that acknowledgement, naming of the problems, and saying that until we are able to remove hate, oppression, discrimination, and racism, the dream of our collective safety and well-being is really not achievable. It's really very, very hopeful. Thank you. And I hope that once we have started this process, this will be backed by all of the resources that the region can offer in terms of financial resources, human resources, and I will be able to see this plan actually getting some legs and being able to see it in action. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much for speaking, Fauzia. Your commitment to community shows, and I am both professionally and personally grateful for all that you do for us. So our youth committee also brought energy, ideas, and brilliance to the process, and I'd now like to invite two members of it, Abby Hua and Chloe Budakian, high school students from Waterloo, to speak.
Okay. Hi, my name is Abby. I'm 15 and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm 16 and I also use she, her pronouns. Abby and I are here today to answer the question, why would 19 youth join a regional council?
Now, we know youth involvement is a pretty new concept, so we're going to try and make a good impression. But the fact that we're here says enough about Waterloo. Growing up here has supplied us with an appetite for change.
The problems we're trying to solve are serious, and we expect you to take us that way. Our council is a reflection of our region, composed of immigrants, longtime residents, activists, and many more, all bringing a vital voice to the conversation that we're having today.
We're here because we're frustrated. Our region is laced with systemic barriers and prejudice, backed by hollow conversations and inaction. We've seen dead ends. We've seen people afraid to speak up, but worst of all, we've been these people.
Being told at your very first job that immigrants should just assimilate, stop ruining Waterloo's once pristine culture is frankly unacceptable. Living in fear of speaking up and being labeled as difficult is even worse.
This may make you uncomfortable, but I'm sure that if you watch your friend who was born and raised in Canada get yelled at, picked at, and then asked if they would better absorb the information in their native language, you would feel uncomfortable too. Newsflash, this was at a public institution, and we were 10.
These incidents are not in isolation. These are not anomalies. Regardless, the fact that these things happened and nothing was done is not okay. All members of our committee have witnessed and written of first and secondhand experiences of inequality in our region.
We are here because we are united by injustice. This chair is yours today, but it's someone else's tomorrow, and it could be one of ours. Change led by youth is change meant to stay, and this is why our involvement needs to be a priority.
We have jumped at every possible opportunity. We've gotten involved with our community, and change is starting to happen. The mere fact that we are invited to speak with you today is evidence that youth voices are beginning to be incorporated into these conversations.
And this change needs to continue. Actions such as speaking with students in high schools and other educational facilities, continuing or implementing similar youth leadership opportunities like Waterloo Region's Youth Council are all vital in the growth and development of our region. In order to ensure a bright future, we need to put in the work today. We want to help the region. We want to help you, but you need to let us.
So I'm brought back to the question, why would 19 youth join a regional council? Because we trust the region and we trust in you. We are here because we believe in better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe and Abby. You and the rest of the committee have brought so much incredible impact to this framework, and your commitment to continuing the momentum is absolutely inspiring. I'll spend just a moment to talk about the vision for the framework, which places the community at the center. Our friends, family, neighbors, clients, and in particular, those facing disproportionate barriers to safety and well-being. It starts with a vision for a community where everyone feels safe, cared for, and has the opportunity to thrive. This community-led framework will be our guide to getting there. It will evolve with the community over time. It is the foundation upon which we will achieve meaningful and transformational change. It solidifies a process for action. We presented the emerging framework to you last December, and since that time, the community has been providing feedback design sessions. Those sessions reconfirmed that truth and reconciliation and anti-hate, anti-racism, and anti-oppression are not only pillars or lenses for this vision. They are at the heart of what we need to do together to achieve safety and well-being for all. It is wrapped around our community as part of who we need to be. Some of the pieces of the framework also look a little different. Through community feedback, the community wanted to include the social determinants of health, and you now see these appear as an outer ring. This helps to show how things like our natural and built environments, income, the food we have access to, and so much more impact community safety and well-being. Then there are the three bubbles. These signify the key components of the needed transformation. A safe and well community that's rooted in circles of support, self-determined communities, and accountability in action. In all of these conversations, we heard a lot about the importance of families. We also heard that tonight in the presentation on mental health. And family means a lot of different things. It can be chosen family, friends, neighbors, community organizations, whoever makes up that core circle of support. And when families can support themselves, there's far less need for system supports. We also heard about the importance of self-determined communities. Communities know their needs best. And when communities are resourced to self-determine their needs and supports, that's when safety and well-being is possible. This is about shifting power to community to achieve safety and well-being. And finally, there is system accountability in action. This is about rebuilding institutional supports, working with communities to determine outcomes, and being held accountable. The community also asked us to highlight that trauma-informed approaches must be highlighted, and it's also part of the framework now.
Other parts of the framework include conditions that need to be present for a safe and well community. This includes honoring identities, understanding intersectionalities, and making representation meaningful and powerful. Another big piece of this work was determining the barriers to achieving safety and well-being for all, because without addressing those, we can't achieve the vision. Barriers identified by community include systemic discrimination, marginalization and oppression, as well as lack of representation at decision-making tables across communities and within communities. While we need to address many barriers, there's good work being done in the community that we need to grow. These include completing the list of calls to action that drive change, creating culturally safe spaces, and recreating villages of support. There are many more things identified by the community to grow and explore, and this framework will continue to evolve as the needs of the community change. There's difficult work ahead, but at the heart of it is creating the kind of deep change that uproots where we began and reroutes this community on a better path forward. So let's talk about what's next.
Learning and unlearning has been central to the development of the framework. And when I say this, I want to be authentic and call out that this is a system that's learning from community and the wisdom it holds. It's also about creating the space for shared learning so we can find new ways to better work together. Making change in complex systems is also not linear. It means taking risks to try new things and work differently and take our lead from the community. To do this, first, we must continue to learn together. Secondly, we have to nurture trust and shared hope. And lastly, we have to let community lead the way. Truth and reconciliation must be at the heart of next steps. For implementation to be successful, Indigenous communities must be supported to lead the design of the approach moving forward. This is a new way of working that is community-led and system-supported. Many people are committed and excited about what's next. It will be important to maintain this momentum. That means we now must share the framework more broadly, work with partners intentionally on next steps, and create regular engagement loops that are accessible for all.
We heard time and time again that inclusive and community-led governance is required to properly guide the implementation. This means creating opportunities for more voices, more leaders, and ongoing collaboration. It also means creating more flexible opportunities for broader participation. This work cannot happen overnight, and we need to work together to sustain the change that's needed. This means building capacity across community and resourcing community-led efforts differently. It also means leveraging existing investments and finding ways to direct resources towards the framework. But we must also find new sources too. Another component of implementation will be a commitment to accountability and learning. This means decolonizing the way we evaluate the change and collect data, and working with community to explore Indigenous approaches and ways of knowing.
With that, thank you all so much for coming on the journey with us. That is the end of our presentation of the framework, and we would be happy to take any questions.
I want to say a huge thank you to all the presenters and all the participants. I know Councillor Shantz and I had the opportunity to participate in some of the focus groups, and it was just an amazing dynamic. This is something that we could have done quickly, and we didn't. We took our time to do it right, and I really want to commend Connie and Fauzia and all of the raft of leaders within the community that helped shape this framework. It's not going to gather dust. It's going to continue to evolve, and it's really quite exciting. Councillor Galloway.
Madam Chair, well, I can echo those remarks. This is really quite a profound document, and very pleased to see it here tonight. And particularly, and I too want to thank all those that have been integrally involved in this. And of course, it's not over, so there's still a long way to go. And certainly, once we get to the action plans and the implementation, that's of course is where the rubber hits the road. I'm particularly pleased that the social determinants of health have rightly found their way into a community safety and well-being plan, and I really see the end product as we work our way to that as being part of the larger vision that regional council has embraced. With all of the various upstream initiatives that we have commenced, and this is certainly an important one, but alongside the anti-racism initiative, Wellbeing Waterloo Region, the new upstream initiatives fund that council supported in the recent budget deliberations, and of course the very exciting opportunity for a justice center in the community. So this is an important piece of that entire strategy and that entire vision. I have a rather mundane question to ask, however, and because this is mandated by the province, and because we passed the deadline, at least the original deadline for which this plan was to be prepared. What is the status now? What is the province saying in terms of the deadline for the finished plan?
Before I let Connie or Fauzia answer, I'm going to say, do you want to move the recommendation before us, because that will go a long way to being able to submit that to the province? And that's what we approve.
Yeah, I'll be happy to support it. I guess maybe I need a little bit of clarification, Madam Chair. is this the plan that gets submitted, or does the action elements also have to be attached to it before it is ready to be submitted to the province?
I'll get out of Connie's way and she can answer.
Thank you, and through the chair, as an update, we've been in communication with the Solicitor General's office and provided a midpoint update on the plan development. So they're aware of where we are at in terms of developing the plan, and that we plan to submit hopefully very shortly, pending Council's endorsement of the framework. Pending approval of the community plan that we've developed, staff will sort of look at the legislative requirements and prepare a submission to the Solicitor General's office that meets the legislative requirements. We are more than confident that with the 170 action plans underway in the community on community safety and well-being, that we have a lot of work underway that's happened, and that this framework will meet the legislative requirements for a community safety and well-being plan. So our intention is to submit the framework.
Okay, well, just one further comment, Madam Chair. It was a number of years ago, and Councillor McGarry will remember that we used her office in Cambridge when she was then the Minister of Natural Resources. And we met with Minister Navke, Chief Larkin, Christiane Sadler, myself, and a few other people to discuss this exact this legislation that he was contemplating at the time, to have every municipality, every community in the province develop a community safety and well-being plan. And we didn't agree necessarily on all the factors. Of course, it ended up in the wrong piece of legislation, but we understood that the only piece of legislation at the time that was open and available to have this particular initiative be implemented in. So it's really great. You know, I'm not sure how many years later, Councillor McGarry, but I would say 6 years later, we finally see the fruits of all that work, and thanks to staff, and certainly thanks to all the people involved for the great work that has gotten us to this point now, finally.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. So you're moving it, Councillor Schatz?
Thank you. I'd be happy to second it. And I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you to everyone who worked on this. It was although it happened in a very short period of time, it was a long process in that there was a lot of input and a lot of work that went on behind the scenes. So thank you very much to everyone who pulled this together.
Thank you, Councillor Schatz. Councillor Bravanovich.
Thanks, Chair Redmond, and I too want to express my thanks to Fauzia and our staff team, Fauzia, the other Fauzia, and all of the citizens that have worked as part of this, and a special thank you to Abby and Chloe for bringing the youth voices not only to the overall meeting but to the table tonight. On behalf of the 19 of you that have been a part of this process, you know, being engaged as a young person is really so important. I mean, it's important for us as community leaders to hear from you and the youth generation, but it's also a great foundation. And you know, you're already leaders today, and you'll no doubt, you know, go on to become community leaders in various aspects in the future. And so a heartfelt thank you for your input. And I'm really excited about this body of work going forward. I think it really is the foundation upon much of our upstream initiatives that we as a council are committed to, and that I know all of us as members of council are committed to for the region. So thank you, and I look forward to the journey in the weeks, months, and years ahead on this body of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I wanted to remind Councillor Galloway that it was 2016 that we met in that particular office. But what struck me when I went through the very long list of documents that had gone on before that informed this work in all sectors, you recognize that this region has been a leader already in community and safety well-being. And although our plan may be later than others, you look to the work of Crime Prevention Council or the extensive list of other organizations and membership around that table, other organizations around the region, the fact that people have recognized how important the social determinants of health is in creating this plan. And I think what it shows is that we in Waterloo Region have been leaders in this work for a very long time. And I would gather that I sort of expect our plan in Waterloo Region to be head and shoulders above many others with the long, extensive history that we've had in leading the way, not just here in Waterloo Region or Ontario or Canada, but definitely internationally. So I wanted to make that reference tonight and look to the faces and the names on the list of the committee members, as well as those who have stayed to present tonight as continuing to be leaders. So when I look at the youth that already presented tonight, they're not the leaders of the future, Abby and Chloe. You're already leaders in our community. And boy, it'll go a long way to whatever you're going to do in our community. This plan is written for you. It's written for our kids and our grandkids. And it's also written in a time period where there's more focus on things like racism, inequity in our social development, in some of the gaps in the services and the attitudes that are required to build a safe and equitable and well community. So I think that this is the time that this needs to go forward. I think it'll be very well supported. And really the question I was going to ask about sort of what comes next, I think has been answered, but I'll just turn to Connie to see once the submission goes in, once the action plans go in, what do you expect in the near future then to come back from the ministry, and kind of where do we go from here? And thanks again for all of your work. This is really important to the heart of our community.
Connie?
Thank you. If I can answer that through the chair. So in terms of what's to come, again, I think we talked a lot about that work. My understanding around the ministry requirements is it's a once a year update that goes to the ministry on the implementation. And so that, again, won't be the focus of our efforts, but we will look to community to help guide us in the future and how we bring the framework to life and what that looks like in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to echo the comments of my colleagues on council, the appreciation to all of those that were involved in this. And particularly want to say thanks to Chloe and Abby, that has been said before. I've got a 16-year-old granddaughter, and I just feel so good to see the enthusiasm that you have and that you can spread that to other young adults in our community. This document, I think, is the heart and soul of who we want to be as a region of Waterloo. And so thank you for exposing that for us. While I'm sure it seemed like a long process in getting to where we are today, it's just the beginning of a journey I hope that we're going to be on in this community. And thank you for getting us on that journey. And thank you for making us feel comfortable with having to have uncomfortable conversations in our community. It's taking us to another level, and it's going to be a learning experience, and it's not going to be easy, but you have paved the way for us, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. I was sitting here reflecting that I have to tell you, I sometimes heard angry voices, but every conversation was authentic and lots of them were uncomfortable. And that's how you get to the heart and the truth. And Abby and Chloe, it feels like we're all sort of centering you out, but I want to say I heard two things from you. I heard where youth listen to us, and I take your advisement, but I also heard that you're involved because you believe in the region and you trust us. And to me, that's a very sacred trust that we need to go forward with and make sure that this framework continues to define our community and make sure that it's inclusive and equitable. So thank you both very much, and apologize for the lateness, but you may have noticed we all like to talk a lot. So thank you very much. And again, thank you for the team you represent. So we have a motion that has been moved and seconded that the regional municipality of Waterloo Council approve the community safety and well-being framework, and that council directs staff to report back on the implementation approach and outcomes as it is co-designed with the community and outlined in the report attached dated January 26, 2022. See, I'm talking and they're already voting. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. And again, everyone who is on, who has their fingerprints on this document. It is a living framework and it will continue to evolve. So thank you all so much. Okay, colleagues. I would now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meetings as listed. Yeah. Okay, moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Shantz. It is items A through L. So I'd ask you to use your voting icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. Colleagues, there is a communications package which was distributed electronically. Don't know if there are any of these questions or comments on that that's received for information. I'd now entertain a motion to go into the committee of the whole to consider reports. If I could have a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Kiefer. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. First report is finance report. We will have one motion to accept all of the financial reports. If anyone has a comment or wants to question any of the reports, this is A through E. Okay, Councillor Galloway, are you moving and seconding it, or you have a question?
I got both hands up there, Madam Chair. No, I have a question on the security services matter. And I don't know if Mr. Schmidt is available to answer any questions, or because it has to do with the, I'd like to ask about the fair enforcement protocol, particularly on ION, and I've raised this before, and I'm wondering whether or not there's been any more work done, any more study done on our fair enforcement policy on the ION. There are people who feel we are a bit too aggressive in that regard, and that there are people in the community who see it as being somewhat oppressive because of their background and their relationship with those kinds of authorities. And it's always been my observation when we've had reports in the past on fair enforcement on the ION, that our rate of fair evasion is very low and below the industry standard, or the standard that the acceptable standard of 3%, I believe, is the number. And what flexibility, I guess my question is, what flexibility do we have in this security services contract that if and when we would want to reduce fair enforcement activity because we don't feel it's necessary, or not, I mean, or necessary to the extent that we're doing it, that we would reduce it to some extent? Is there flexibility in this contract? Or are we finding ourselves in a situation, as I think I was told previously, well, the contract is the contract, and we'll pay that amount of money regardless whether or not we actually reduce the level of enforcement that we might.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Galloway. So that is item D, and I see Mr. Schmidt has lit up his Hollywood Square. So over to you, Mr. Schmidt.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I think some of this may be to Mr. Dyer. I am not entirely sure whether the contract specifically specifies what duties are to be done. I don't believe it does, and I believe we could redirect. And we are looking at different options on how we fare enforce, and it is not just the ION; it is actually on our bus system as well. And we do also, another big part of what the staff under this, or this contract does, is have security staff that respond to incidents. So it's much more than just the fare enforcement, but we can change the nature of the fare enforcement. It doesn't have to be. We can decide how that is done, what approach they take, what uniforms they're wearing. All of those are things that we can control, I believe, through this contract. So we're not locked in to a specific type of fare enforcement as a result of this contract. And I believe that's correct, Mr. Dyer. If I'm incorrect, you can correct me.
Mr. Dyer?
No, I believe Mr. Schmidt is correct. I would note that this is a proposal, not a tender, and so we have, I think, a fair bit of flexibility in terms of the level and extent of our security services, and we adjust those levels of service periodically as the need changes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm certainly not suggesting that we reduce our security services. It's the fare evasion that is of some concern, and I've raised it before, and we'll wait again until there's another report. I think we get an annual report or whatever, and I'll raise it again at that time. Thanks very much.
So, Councillor Galloway, are you moving the finance reports, having asked your question?
Sure, I'll move them.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Moved by Councillor Jowett. Councillor Erb, please go ahead.
Thank you. A question on the same item. Is the Part B, the 2,730,000, is that almost like a retainer for additional services that they would be paid? Mr. Dyer or Schmidt?
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, no, it's not a retainer. It's an estimate based on the additional security services we're anticipating using over the course of the year for capital projects, for special events and other items that are listed here. Again, with the nature of this bid being a proposal, we've estimated based on previous experience and our plans for 2022 and beyond what we think the level of that additional work will be. And what this approval does is basically gives us the authority to enter into the purchase order with Barbara Collins in this case, but the payments will only be made based on services provided.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bravanovich.
Thanks. So I will support the motion that's before us today, but I just do want to flag that I think at some point there would be some value in us actually taking a look at bringing these services in-house. I know the region's historical model has been to do this way, particularly since taking over transit but I just in contrast from a municipal perspective, we actually have in-house security, and I think there's value in that, and so it is something I would like to see us explore, perhaps for beyond 2025, between now and then. So I'm just flagging that as something for staff to maybe look into. And I see Mr. Lochner has popped his Hollywood Square on.
He looks like he's prepared to Yeah, he'll take that as direction. So thank you, Councillor Bravanovich. It's been moved and seconded. I see no more speakers. Please use your icons to vote yes and no. And this is on the Finance Committee reports. That is carried, colleagues. Next are committee reports. It's the Licensing and Hearing and Committee of the Whole. I vote on a summary of these committees. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Erb. Seeing no questions, please vote yes or no. That is items 1 through 4. That is carried, colleagues. Next is closed council. We now will vote to approve the items from closed council earlier this evening. I'd ask for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Strickland. Do we want to put these up, or? Councillor Bravanovich.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just going to ask Chair Edmund, is we should share them publicly.
Yes, it is going up on the screen. So this is the motion. It's been moved and seconded. I see no questions, so it's a settlement in relation to a court action. If you could use your icons to vote yes or no. Thank you, colleagues. That is carried. Other matters under Committee of the Whole. Appointment of new directors to ROWCHI. And I would ask Mr. Dyer to introduce this report. And Jeff Schelling is here if there are questions. Mr. Dyer?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The Board of Directors of ROWCHI, which is the Region of Waterloo Community Housing, Inc., that Board of Directors is made up of 3 staff members, and 2 of those members are no longer employed with the region, and so we need to appoint 2 additional members to continue the largely operational work of the ROWCHI Board. And just as a reminder, there are 2 properties that fall under the jurisdiction of ROWCHI, which are the 2 former La Capana properties that were acquired by the region back in 2015.
So, Mr. Schelling, are you just here to answer difficult questions, or do you want to add anything to this?
Nothing to add, just here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, it is the appointment of Ryan Petitpierre, Director of Housing Services, and Danielle DeFields, Director of Community Planning, as directors of Waterloo Region Community Housing, Inc., for a term of 3 years. Has it been moved? Sorry? Okay, we're voting before we're moving and seconding it, guys. You're just a little ahead. Moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Bravanovich. Now you can use your icons to vote yes and no. Thank you, colleagues. That is carried. I would now consider a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume. Moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Shantz. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. A motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Kiefer. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. We're voting on that the Council adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. That was carried. That was carried and got off the screen really quickly. Got to keep up here. So notices of motion. The first is Councillor McGarry to introduce your motion on the speed limit reduction on Myers Road. Councillor McGarry?
Thank you, Chair. And did you want me to read the motion?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. Whereas Myers Road in Southeast Cambridge is an area experiencing rapid growth and intensification and will soon be home to Cambridge's new recreation complex, Idea Exchange, Catholic School and Public School, whereas the speed limit on Myers Road in front of the Holy Spirit Catholic School and Moffat Creek Public School is currently set at 50 kilometers per hour, whereas there's ongoing discussion concerning the future layout and design of Myers Road, whereas driver behavior within school zones continues to be an ongoing concern across the region of Waterloo, be it resolved that the speed limit on the entirety of Myers Road be lowered to 40 kilometers an hour to facilitate slower vehicular traffic in front of Holy Spirit Catholic School and Moffat Creek Public School while the design, planning, construction, and implementation of Myers Road occurs. And further, that the Region of Waterloo staff report back to Council in 2022 on all school zones within the Region of Waterloo that do not currently have speed limits of 40 kilometers per hour. And speaking to the motion.
Please go ahead.
I wanted to just make a few comments that we as elected officials take our role in facilitating public safety and safety in particular as a top priority. And indeed, road safety issues are one of the top reasons why people reach out to elected officials. You can see from the letters from about 20 individuals this evening in our correspondence file that the school community, the staff at the schools, as well as the student transportation services have all worked together in order to bring this motion forward as they're concerned about ongoing safety in that particular area. Student Transportation Services has worked with Holy Spirit and Moffat Creek schools for years to improve student safety. They want to say that they want to see the consistency of 40 kilometers per hour in all school zones. And at the other end of Myers Road, in front of two other schools, it is continuing to be 40 kilometers per hour. We all know that decreased speeds decrease stopping distance. And I think this issue was accentuated when a child was hit in front of Moffat Creek School just this past September. Fortunately has recovered, but had those speeds been lowered, we do know that that the outcomes for those that are hit, whether on bicycle or pedestrians, are certainly improved. We can improve active transportation experiences and can encourage that with lower speed limits in the area. And these supports again come from supports from both board directors, superintendents, CFO, and general manager of both boards, as well as student transportation. Drivers in our region expect school zones to be 40 kilometers per hour. Without these signs in front of these schools, drivers can easily miss these cues that they are actually in a school zone. We're seeing a huge increase in development in this area. It's going to be home to a new recreation complex and 2 new schools and a lot of residential areas in that end of Myers Road and Cambridge. We know that drivers need to follow posted signs and traffic signs in order to improve road safety for all road users. We know that they need the cues and they have the responsibility themselves to follow the posted rules of the road. We also know that parents and educators need to continue to do their part to keep our roads safe around picking up and dropping off children and their students. And ultimately, the responsibility for following the rules of the road falls to all of us. We know that other schools in Waterloo region should also be at 40 kilometers per hour. And we also know that there's a couple of pilot projects right now in Cambridge, particularly on focusing on school zones. And these pilot projects are increasing the visualization that people are entering as school board with flashing lights over the 40 kilometers per hour sign, with radar signboards, with decals painted on the road that say school zone. And we're all trying to do our best in order to improve school safety. I would say that the parents now have worked with the ward councillor as well as our regional councillors and all school officials to try and improve the road safety in this area, lowering the speed limit along this end of the road while the rest of the implementation of and design and construction of the reconstruction of Myers Road would go a long way to signal to all of the drivers that this needs to be a safe zone. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you. My understanding, Councillor Kiefer, is you're seconding this motion. Did you want to speak to it?
Just briefly, I do want to second it. Thank you for allowing me to do that, Madam Chair. And Councillor McGarry has outlined the situation perfectly. Herself and Councillor Jowett and myself, along with Scott Hamilton, the ward councillor, have been inundated with phone calls and email and you name it. There's more to this than just the speed limit going on. We still need to carry on, which we have been with the school board dialogue with regards to parking and other issues. That seems to be a regional problem as well throughout the region. And I just would urge that we continue our dialogue and encourage the school board to work with us and not against us on these things. I will be pleased to second it when the time comes. Thank you.
I considered it seconded. Councillor Kiefer. Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the motion, but I just want to note, well, a couple of things. First of all, we've lowered all our speed limits in front of schools in the residential areas to 40 kilometers, but in the rural areas, we've lowered it from 80 to 60. So I think when you say schools, certainly happy to hear a report back on all of them, but I'm not sure lowering from 80 to 40 would be a reasonable change, but something to think about.
Thank you, Councillor Shantz. Councillor Jowett.
Thanks, Chair Redmond. Yes, I'll support the motion as well, and certainly want to put my thanks out to Councillor Hamilton, who championed this with vim and vigor, if you will. I did also want to echo that I think there's more to this than the 40-kilometer change, although I do think this is going to be significant in making change. I think I was hopeful that perhaps staff can help us in understanding how we can play a role in ensuring that schools take into consideration egresses and ingresses, or recognizing that that the 40-kilometer kilometer per hour is not going to be the sole solution here. It's not going to be the magic bullet. That we also need to make sure that kids are crossing at the crosswalk, and certainly that the way with which people can drop off the kids is more sensible. So I guess I'm looking to see how that sort of plays a role in here. I'm not sure that it's any kind of friendly amendment, because I think it's a little more complex than that. I'm just looking to staff for a response. I see Mr. Schmidt is here.
Mr. Schmidt, did you want to respond? You're on mute, Thomas.
Oh, I am. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The project team that is looking at redesigning Myers Road, they've been working on it for a long time, and given the number of comments they received through last year, they're actually taking a step back, and we've recently hired a consultant and are looking at that whole road entirely from the perspective of what can we do to make it active transportation and safe first. And I'll say the instructions were regardless of impact on car traffic. So that is the approach that's being taken on this. I do support 40-kilometer speed limits in front of schools, but simply changing, and I think staff's perspective would be simply changing the sign is not going to be effective in actually changing behavior. That has not been our experience, that changing the speed limit does not impact behavior. There are some things that we are planning on doing this spring. So we are the flexible bollard program that we've used in some rural areas. We are going to try that on Myers Road this spring. So our goal is to put flexible bollards on. Again, providing some obstructions does definitely help slow down and make people aware of their speed. The project team also continues to work with the school board on trying to find a safe way to drop off students. Currently, students are being dropped off along the edge of the road in no parking and no stopping zones. So we are looking at ways to try and get that activity onto the school site, which we believe is safer than having it done on the road.
Councillor
So there is a lot of work being done on that road and will be in the future done to decrease speeds and improve safety.
Thank
you. Much
Ms.
appreciated for that, Mr. Schmidt, because I do know that this is a little bit more complex than just one solution, and I'm glad that we're just going to move forward with something and continue the flexible ballast sounds really helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bavanovich.
Thanks, Chair Redmond, and thanks to Councillor McGarry for bringing this forward, and I'll certainly support her motion. We know that speed is a problem in all of our school zones, and as has been noted, many of us at the municipal level have reduced speed limits on roads within the municipal jurisdiction. I would concur with all the comments that have been made that changing the speed in itself won't do it. I mean, we know that ongoing education is going to be key. We know that additional enforcement is going to be key, and I think it speaks to the fact that, you know, we continue to push on the need for more automated speed enforcement, particularly in school areas. And you know, I think we will quickly, if we don't see things changing provincially or in our relationship with the sole provider that we have right now, I think we seriously need to consider whether or not we're going to ramp up our own efforts here locally to create an administration office that can handle ticketing, and perhaps in fact we may be able to provide some service delivery not only to our 8 municipalities but to others who no doubt are also anxious to increase their levels of speed enforcement throughout southwestern Ontario.
Thank you for that. It has been moved and seconded. I see no other speakers. I'd ask you to use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. The next notice of motion is moved by Councillor Clarke, and I understand seconded by Councillor Erb. It too will be put up. So, Councillor Clarke, I'm going to suggest if you want to introduce it and highlight it, you don't have to read it unless you want to, given the lateness of the time. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Given the lateness of the time, I don't think I could read it. I don't think I need to speak to it. I think the delegations that went earlier this evening did that more than adequately, and I think that all members of council are very aware of this issue. What I would like to do, though, is ask for a recorded vote. The delegations did express an interest in knowing that this isn't unanimously supported. I think we probably lost some councillors by now, but perhaps those of us who are left could vote in that way.
Thank you, Councillor Clarke. Councillor Erb, as seconder, would you like to speak to this motion?
Sure, if I may, regardless of the time. I think from time to time, elected officials are asked to respond to some initiatives in other jurisdictions. And often our response is to stay in our own lane and not interfere with the work of other elected bodies. However, I think responding to Bill 21 is a glaring exception where we need to offer a strong and firm response. And the Charter of Rights and Freedom it's a document, and the rights and freedoms of fellow Canadians are guaranteed to everyone, and not just for a selected few. And when some are facing discrimination, I think we all have the right, but more important, the obligation to speak up when we see the effects that something like Bill 21 is having on those in situations. And as Councillor Clarke stated in her motion, this bill disproportionately affects visible minorities, particularly women, limits them to other opportunities, and that's not the community or country we aspire to be. And this isn't a matter of politics between government jurisdictions, but of basic human rights. And what Bill 21 has highlighted is that no one should face any discrimination on the basis of religious belief or not conforming to other expectations. And so, as a country, we pride ourselves on the principles of multiculturalism, and we need to do everything we do to not erode that pride and reality, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. Councillor Bravanovich.
Thanks, Chair Redmond. I want to thank Councillor Clarke for bringing this forward here to Regional Council. I know both you, Madam Chair, and Councillor Clarke met with the Coalition of Muslim Women to discuss this, and it was great to hear both from Mifrah earlier this evening, as well as from Michael from Interfaith. This is, as Councillor Erb has indicated, something that impacts so many people. If you're a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, you're impacted. If you're a Sikh male who wears a turban, you're impacted. If you're a Jewish male with who wears a yarmulke, you're impacted. If you're a Christian of any gender and you happen to wear a cross, you're impacted. This really, truly does, in terms of this legislation, go against everything that we stand for as a community and as a country. As we did in 2019, we spoke out against it then, and it's important to speak out against it now as it goes into the court system in Quebec. Some would argue, as has been pointed out, this is primarily a Quebec matter. Yes, it is in terms of the legislation right now, but it directly and indirectly impacts citizens in every community in every corner of our country. And it is really important for communities to stand up on this issue. Both mayors McGarry and Jaworski are aware that this was an issue that recently came up at our Ontario Big City Mayors. And it's a position and we've taken a position as a caucus on this issue. This really is something that the federal government and that the leaders of all of the political parties need to speak out for in a unified voice. I know everyone's doing a bit of dancing and being cautious on the issue. And this motion really gets at the crux of the issue. We passed a similar motion on Monday night at our own council here, and I think it is important. I'm hoping that the court case gets the kind of result it needs, because if it doesn't, you can rest assured that it's going to end up probably either way, it's going to end up at the Supreme Court. And when it does, then it doesn't just impact Quebec, it potentially impacts all of us in terms of legislation. And that is a grave concern for me and many others. So thank you, Councillor Clarke, for your leadership on this.
So I'm going to look to the clerk to do a recorded vote.
Chair, were we going to put the motion up?
Yes, thank you. We will put the motion up right now.
And while we do that, I thank you, Councillor Verbanovich, for the reminder. I do want to thank the members of the coalition for not just meeting with us, but for their assistance to me in crafting this motion.
Good. Chair Redmond?
In favor.
Councillor Armstrong?
In favor.
Councillor Clarke?
In favor?
Councillor Erb,
Favor.
Councillor Foxton,
In favor.
Councillor Galloway,
In favor.
Councillor Jaworski,
In favor?
Councillor Jowett,
In favor?
Councillor Kiefer,
In favor?
Councillor McGarry,
In favor.
Councillor Nowak,
Favor.
Councillor Shantz,
In favor?
Councillor Urbanovic.
In favor.
Thank you.
Unanimously carried. Thank you, Councillor Clarke and Councillor Erb, for bringing that to the floor of this council. The next motion is a notice of motion by Councillor Jowett. Councillor Jowett, would you like to introduce your motion? And again, please don't feel obligated to read it, but if you'd like to introduce it, we can get it on the floor.
Yeah, I appreciate you not making me read it. It reminds me of my GRCA days when the motions were like 2 pages long and legally we had a bylaw that made us read it. Anyway, I will introduce this. I'm sorry Greg and Ian couldn't be here. I hope Matthew's still around. I can tell you that Matthew has worked so hard with Waterloo Region Best and the partners and stakeholders through COVID. It's been very, very difficult. I do have one request of staff. The letter is before you. My motion's there for council, but if staff could respond to the motion by looking into the COVID Safe program and acquisition of PPE, and then bring a recommendation back to the next Economic Development Committee. We have the details for the advocacy program and the rapid tests for council to send the letter to the province. So if we could ensure that happens, I'm sure we would create happiness with our partners of Best Waterloo Region. And so the motion is before council, and there we go.
Thank you, Councillor Jowett. Do you have someone to second it, or are we looking for a seconder?
Oh, I don't think anybody will have a problem seconding it.
Okay. So it has been moved, and I would like to point out to council, it's seconded by Councillor McGarry. Just point out that there was a delegation. It actually was the presidents of the KW Chamber of Commerce and the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce who were coming to speak in favor of this motion. Unfortunately, due to the lateness of the evening, they had conflicts arise and they had to chair other meetings. So they were not here to speak to the supporting this motion, but they absolutely are supportive. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very quick. I want to thank Councillor Jowett for bringing this motion forward and all the work that was by her and others. I think the comments from the both chambers are very, very relevant, and for sure the provincial and federal governments need to come to the table on this. And I'm very pleased to be able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no other speakers, and I have not had a request for a recorded vote, so I would ask you, it's been moved and seconded, if you would use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. There are no additional notices of motion. There's no unfinished business. Is there any other business? Questions? I would now entertain a motion to enact the bylaws for second and third readings. Moved by Councillor Bravanovich, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried. So now the most controversial vote of the evening, a motion to adjourn. Moved by everyone. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Nowak. 2 hands in the air for Councillor Armstrong. If you could use your icons to vote yes or no. Surprisingly, that is carried. Colleagues, great conversation, great evening. So much good news in this community, despite the fact these are troubling times. Please stay safe, and I'm sure we'll see you all soon.
Safe drive home, everybody who has to.